So welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill. I'm the editor of Legal IT Insider. And on our webinar today, we're having a fascinating conversation around how to drive a compliance-first culture in an AI world. So we have two panelists with me today. You may be familiar possibly with Paul Carhill. He is an associate and head of compliance at Fletchers, which for years has been a trailblazer in the work they're doing with leveraging AI. Being a tech-forward firm is not a new thing for them. So I'm really grateful to Paul for joining us to share some of his learnings and the firm's learnings over the years when it comes to balancing innovation and compliance. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Caroline.
Thanks for joining. Vicky Exkery is a product manager overseeing legal solutions at our webinar partner, One Advanced. She's held other senior product roles at the likes of IP vendor Picama and property maintenance software provider Fixflow. And she'll be discussing how vendors can support law firm compliance efforts, among other perspectives. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Caroline.
Thanks for joining me. So just in terms of the agenda, just to give you some sort of scene setting, we're going to be talking about why compliance matters more than ever. Paul is going to talk about some of the work that Fletchers is doing and has been doing with AI, both in terms of internal development and external development, and how Fletchers approaches compliance in both of those situations. We're going to be talking about how to drive that compliance first culture, whether looking at the fact that there's been a shift from a tick box culture, looking at things like staff policies and staff behaviour, which I spend a lot of my time talking about now, how you balance the demands of needing to be compliant alongside the pressure to be agile and to be efficient, and also then last but very much not least, the role of AI in meeting compliance challenges, which we'll come on to talk about in a very short period of time for all of that. Paul, so tell me about, just I introduced you, but just perhaps tell me before you dive into what Fletchers are doing, just tell me about your role. Did I encapsulate it?
I think you've encapsulated part of it, but the part of it that's relevant to what we're talking about today. We have a reasonably large compliance team at Fletchers, because we're a reasonably large firm. There are 10 of us at the moment, and as a result, we're in a good place to be on top of these things. We also have an increasing AI team, probably just about as bigger than the compliance team at the moment, and really our involvement with the AI team is sort of from beginning to end often in the work that they do. Not to say we get into the nuts and bolts of it. We don't. I do not understand any of that, and I'm reasonably sure my colleagues don't either. But we're involved with them throughout, from sort of inception of an idea to really the end of it, because that's the only way to ensure that it is built from beginning to end with compliance in mind. I think historically there is probably a feeling there would be a clash between the tech side and the compliance side. What we have found, and we have not always been perfect, we are getting better. We can get better again. By involving us at the beginning, we avoid those clashes. Where we are not involved at the beginning, where a project might run for 6 months with certain ideas becoming embedded, with a plan being put in place, that is the point at which compliance becomes a little bit unpopular with those teams, because 6 months work has been done and we come along and say, actually, no. By involving us at the beginning, we've avoided those issues in our more recent work, because ultimately everyone knows the parameters, everyone knows what will and won't be allowed, and it just makes everybody's life easier. But yeah, largely speaking, we do many other things, but one of our things is our involvement on the AI side. Okay.
All right. I might bring actually, so before we dive into Fletchers, just sort of to set the scene, perhaps, that's really fascinating. I love that, and I really want to come back to that point about getting your compliance in early and how you make it from a cultural perspective, how you get that buy-in. It's just the same as everything, isn't it, at the moment? It's like, how do you get that buy-in? How do you almost incentivize people, before we dive into Fletchers, actually, because so perhaps just to bring Vicky in as well, because we're going to talk quite a bit to start with about Fletchers. So Vicky, from your perspective, first of all, did I get your role in full? Is there anything you want to add? And also perhaps tell me from your perspective about why do you think it's correct that compliance matters more than ever right now?
Yes, of course. I mean, compliance has definitely become sort of a top 3 challenge for all of the law firms, not even depending on sort of size, so from smaller to sort of the larger firms as well. And our job as well as vendors is to make it really easier for solicitors and firms to deal with compliance and sort of just almost make it invisible for them. But at the same time, as for compliance becoming much more important than ever, I would also say there's things like the regulatory scrutiny that's rising at the moment. So you have sort of the rising number of AML fines. I think just last year we've seen a record number of AML fines, and there's also quite a few of them that were sort of several figures. And I would also add to that, I think from a client perspective, so the clients of the law firms, they are also sort of looking to assess the firms on sort of the compliance, on their compliance, on their maturity, data governance as well. And it's also becoming sort of a bigger cost to them in terms of reputation as well.
Yeah, completely. The regulatory position is so complex at the moment, isn't it? You know, on the one hand, you've got regulation not really keeping up, which we'll probably come on to talk about. And on the other, you've got the EU AI Act. You know, you've got this really complex position that people are having to juggle. And as you say, you know, more fines and you know, it's a real mishmash at the moment, isn't it? Talk about. So I've always enjoyed keeping up with Fletchers and have written many times about the work the firm is doing, including a project with the University of Liverpool, where I know you've partnered quite closely to develop tools. But talk to people, you know, people, not everyone knows you. Talk about the work that you're doing with AI, both in terms of that internal development and external tools.
Okay, well, if I talk initially about the University of Liverpool project, that is actually quite a long-standing project. In fact, that predates my involvement at Fletchers, or predates me being at Fletchers. So at least 5 years old, so possibly before the world was too excited about AI. I think, as I mentioned when speaking to you before, Caroline, sometimes AI is what we call things now that previously we called by a different name. And I do think that's the case. But the tool we used, that we dealt with the University of Liverpool, is in relation to assessing inquiries. So inquiries that come into the business, picking out key information, assessing a score to those inquiries, and basically looking at where we go from there. Now, what I will say, and I think it's always important, particularly with a tool like that, we do not rely on the tool. The tool is a helper to humans, because the tool is not qualified to do the job. If the decisions on those cases were made and thoroughly made by a tool, it would not work. We would have incorrect information going out. We would be picking up the wrong information. But what it does is it is a pointer to a lawyer. It is a pointer that, you know, we think this is a good one, go straight through. Actually, we're not sure about this. Have a read of it, have a look. And that's a lot what that project is. And that has been incredibly successful, and its success rate is very impressive. Somebody from the AI team could tell you what that success rate is. I do not know. That is not my side of things. But my side of things is making sure we follow the right structures with it. We're very comfortable that we're very clear to our clients that this is something that is used. This is involved in our documentation, our privacy policy. We explain these things up front. That's the more historic version. More recently, we have, let's say, an internal large AI team. As I understand it, we still do some work with Liverpool University, but mostly we're now in-house, and there are a wide range of products. So I'm not going to go through each and every one, probably because I would not remember them all. And I did intend to pull the document up, but I've realised I don't have a second screen in this room, so I couldn't look at it anyway. But we're looking into different things now. The approach, it's been a few years now, and I think the first thought on it was we were going to change the world, and we were going to, essentially a world where somebody sitting at a desk can type a query in and receive a legal answer. We are not. The technology is not there at this point, not there to the way it needs to be, not quite as exciting as that. Now, where I, from a compliance point of view, have seen really exciting things is more straightforward processes being automated by AI, and processes that frankly, a machine is going to be better than a human at. There are certain processes that there is, well, some people may be better at but I wouldn't be personally. So some of the work that we do, and I think one product that I've really liked, which on the face of it doesn't sound nearly as exciting as it might, is a product which checks medical records when they come in for us. Nature of the work we do, personal injury and clinical negligence, we deal with thousands and thousands of pages of medical records every week. And for all that they shouldn't, sometimes other people's records end up mixed in with those. And the ICO, we become responsible for them. Obviously, the initial issue has been with a trust or a GP, but we are now responsible. They're in our hands, so we send them on everywhere. Elsewhere, we have caused a problem. And historically, we had humans checking those. And as I say, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, I would not believe that if I check through 200 or 300 pages of records that I have picked out every possible reference to somebody else other than our client. It is I'm not that. My level of detail, attention to detail, is not going to do that. And even if it did, you are going to burn out very, very quickly doing that kind of work day in, day out and not be able to do it any further. We have replaced that with an AI tool that does the same thing. We have tested it against humans. We find it's 9 times more effective than a human at identifying issues. That means we are reducing the risk to the firm by 9 times using that tool. So as I say, in of itself, it isn't that exciting. The story of it, but that actual result is quite an exciting result for anybody who has reviewed medical records as part of their job. Another little thing it does, which is, again, sounds really minor, but if you do this in any kind of way, it ensures that all the records are the same way around. So there are no pages that are upside down, and they are all changed. So you are not having to mess around with rotation. And again, that sounds like a minor thing. For me, it's enormous. Certainly, it just is that time saver. That's the sort of tool that I quite like. I think it's such a clear win-win. Obviously, there's work we need to do in terms of that. Again, we do identify to clients that these kind of products may be used for their work. We do our data protection work on those. We make it clear that why that's being done. It is not a new and unexpected task that is happening. It is not something that a client wouldn't expect to be done to their data. It's simply their data is being reviewed in this instance by a computer rather than a human. And it's things like that we do a lot of. There are others going on at all times, and as I say, I couldn't go through them all now if I wanted to, because they wouldn't have them. But I think that's the best example, one of the best examples I can think of. And as I say, that probably would not excite too many people if we were stood on a stage somewhere talking through it. But in terms of day-to-day utility within the business, it is unbelievably useful.
I think you're not downplaying it, but I've seen this, I've talked through this tool, and it's very cool. And in terms of outcome, as you say, the time saving and in all the benchmarking studies that I've seen recently for these types of review exercises, machines outperform humans in pretty much every case. And having been a lawyer, a litigator, and done the whole reviewing myself, I can understand why, because it's just super boring. So certainly from that accuracy perspective, but so tell me, okay, fine, that's really helpful. So then talk about, so you've done a lot of internal development, use external tools. We don't have to list them. You talked about some of the ways. I mean, if anyone's got questions about specifics, like obviously not beyond what you can talk about, but about the way that you are using AI. Are you engaged much with Gen AI as opposed to, we have to now talk about different types of AI, don't we?
Yes, we are. So there's a lot of that, and that obviously is a very different compliance challenge. That comes to what we talked about earlier. For me, the regulation is not where we are. The guidance is not where we need it to be when we're looking at generative AI, particularly because we need to use data. And the reality is the data we want it to use is useful data. We don't want it out looking generally on the web to pull things back. We're looking for it to pull useful data. We essentially take the sort of highest level of compliance that we can on that. We de-risk as much as possible. We make it as clear as possible to all clients that put it this way, we only use anybody's data for that kind of work with their consent. I appreciate there are issues there with potential removal of consent in future, but we don't think we can be criticised in that situation. We are getting clear consent. We explain exactly what the usage will be. We explain exactly how it will be used. We cover off the other side of that in terms of where the data will be and all of those things. It essentially will be securely within our own server rather than anywhere out there for anyone else to look at. And that would be how we go about it. The difficulty is, as I say, the regulation isn't there. It's not kept up with the innovation, and we're in this very strange situation, I think, where the SRA will every now and then talk about guidance about they think it's a good idea for lawyers to use AI. Or the government will say businesses should be using AI, which is a very vague piece of information to give us without that background. So that's what we do. We also really thoroughly document our decisions, and maybe to put most simply, we run them through a number of people. We will sit in a room and we'll sort of bat it back and forth and work out, are we making this as secure as possible? We'll really document how we've reached that decision. We'll document what we're doing. We will document what risks we envisage come from here. All of that will be put in to give us a document that if somehow in the future we are considered to be on the wrong side of a regulation that is brought in retrospectively, and that could easily happen, it's sort of the nature of data, we'll be able to say, well, okay, but this is the reason we reached the decisions we did, and we are happy with that, and we really do cover that off, and that's the way we approach it. It's sort of as good as we can get at the moment, and we are more cautious than not, is the reality. If there is a decision point where that's where that is the thing, we will tend to take the more cautious approach because we found we can, and that doesn't impinge the development that we're doing. A lot of clients are very keen for the data to be used in this way.
Are they?
And those that aren't, it isn't. So that's really the way we approach things.
It's interesting because with you, and by all means, Vicky, just jump in at any point. So it's interesting because you've got some very advanced clients in terms of they're used to tech because it's of the margins involved in this type of work and the speed at which it needs to be done, but also you've got hugely sensitive data, right? Like, I mean, I guess every firm has sensitive data, but you've got people's deepest medical records. So although you've been, you've got the history with AI, you've got client demand, you've also got that, there's no margin for error, right?
Absolutely not. And I said the level of security, there are smarter people than me on the IT side who essentially ensure that security, that this is in a secure location, that we are working on. It is not out in the world. Without what we're not talking about here, putting medical records into ChatGPT. This is not the thing we're talking about. We're talking about a far more secure world than that. We're talking about enclosed, our own records, our information, not leaving our possession. So yes, and we explain that to clients. We explain it really thoroughly, and that's why a lot of them do agree to go ahead with that.
There's a question that I'll ask as we go, because it partly just helps to get that feeling of everyone, and we're all having a chat. So this is from Tim. In the absence of AI, nice to see you, Tim. In the absence of AI legislation, what do the panel feel we are measuring compliance against? I mean, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I don't know what you think. So the regulation, conversations I have, the regulation is so far behind. I had a conversation with Richard Siskind about this at a forum, an AI forum, and I said on my worst days, I feel like the whole AI regulatory position is being run by tech bros, tech multi-billionaire, billionaire tech bros with zero consideration for the end user, etc., etc. And Richard said, that's how I feel on my best days. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that question.
I think from my side, I would say they are sort of just measuring it against the current regulation that exists. So GDPR, any sort of SRA regulation. And yeah, I would say there's definitely no sort of clear guidance otherwise, unfortunately, which is, it just makes it harder as well for firms.
I don't know if you've got any thoughts beyond that. Obviously, please do put it in the chat.
All I would add on that, Caroline, is
Oh, yes,
our
sorry.
approach is risk-based. We know
Okay.
the legislation is there, so what we look at is the risk, and we make our decision based on risk and based on ensuring there is no risk to anyone as a result of the work we're doing with that data. And if we are concerned there is a risk, we probably won't do it. That's the way we would look at it. And if there is a risk, but it is an acceptable risk, or it is a risk that we consider is reasonable, then we document it. And that is it. As I said, because the regulation isn't where it needs to be, we justify our own decisions by explaining why we have done it, the considerations we have taken, why we have reached that point, and if needs be, we could provide that. But as I say, whether that will ever be the case or not, we don't know. These may be documents that are drafted to never be seen again by anyone else, but the value is in that they exist and that they can be pulled out if they ever needed.
Do you map risk? So how holistic do firms, or do you, or will you, how holistic does it have to be? So I was having a chat with somebody on a panel the other day, and they're doing an exercise mapping risk, and by all means, Vicky, jump in if, with your perspective from a market position. They're doing a very thorough exercise of mapping risk with all of the firm's activities. I mean, it's a huge endeavour, to be frank. I mean, you've got a pretty big compliance scene. Is that something that firms need to be doing?
I mean, I think it is. It's very sort of dependent, isn't it, on the size of firm really dictates how that would be worked. I'm not going to go into like full details, but
yeah,
we have a risk committee. We have consideration. We have regular reviews of risks. There are things on that risk list that are ranging from, I mean, I think probably number one on everyone's risk list at the moment is, or if it isn't, should be danger of cyber attack and what that would mean for a firm. This isn't specific to AI. This is firm generally.
Yeah, they were doing. I didn't explain it very well. They were doing specifically AI risk. So,
right.
And mapping that, I wasn't clear. They were mapping AI risk against all of the firm's activities, and actually, what they're doing is making certain people responsible as well. So they are giving, actually putting people on the hook, which I'm not sure how I'd feel about that, but anyway, but yeah, so they're sort of they're also, it's almost like they're taking AI risk and compliance and then mapping it against all the firm's activities, and I guess to a certain extent strategy as well. They're doing a very holistic sort of coordinated effort, which I thought was quite interesting. And then we got on to talk about frameworks, other frameworks like ISO 42001 and NIST and things like that, which I think a lot of firms are also looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think to an extent, our approach is possibly slightly different because possibly of what we are doing. We, as I say, we are not, and there are lawyers out there without doubt making use of ChatGPT, making use of things like that. We have policies in place that, broadly speaking, say don't. Ours, a lot of what we're doing is more, as I say, internal. It is not quite so Wild West. We prevent the use of things that we don't want to be used. Those things that are to be used are rolled out in a phased and considered way. I'm not going to go into detail, but we are currently assessing some external AI products which may or may not be of use. That will be over quite a long period that they are assessed and tested before they are ever rolled out within the business. I'm sure that will happen in due course, but our approach is that more than the general risk posed by AI, because ultimately we aim to control it sufficiently that we aren't in a position to worry too much about that. That's not to say we don't worry about it and we don't think about it and we don't put things in place, but yeah, it's possibly just a slightly different approach that we take.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I think, and interesting because as I say, this is not new for you. The firm's been at it a really long time. It's interesting. So yeah, so lots of sort of takeaways from that, and including that continuous human in the loop. That was interesting. Going back to that, Vicky, do you see anything different in the market?
No, I actually wanted to say that I think this is exactly what I've seen as well. But I would also say, apart from sort of firms being expected to sort of evidence the process, sort of the oversight and the intent and all of that, I think there's also technology that can help sort of capture those decisions automatically, sort of making the accountability just visible really without adding any sort of admin. I mean, you have sort of all your audit trails or role-based access, for example, and I think those can be also very helpful in terms of documenting those things as well.
Yeah, quite right. As we move, so do you think we're moving from a tick box? So I don't know that. My question is, are we moving from a tick box exercise to something that's a little bit more sort of embedded accountability? Do you think it has been a tick box exercise? Do you think that's changed? And how do you, slightly extending on from that question, how do you get lawyers, touching on what we talked about, Paul, to see compliance as an enabler, that's hard to say, instead of a blocker? If we can revisit that.
So if I start at that point and then maybe work back at the tick box side, for us it is a firm-wide situation, application of the idea of compliance being available to the firm. I mentioned to you the other day, and I think it's true, there is a huge benefit to us. The size of the firm we are a team where we are a compliance team that are not involved in day-to-day HR. We don't make decisions on disciplinaries. We don't make decisions on pay rises. We don't make this. Whereas in a smaller firm, that often your compliance function is also a variety of other functions. Now, over several years, a culture has been built at Fletcher's, as I say, nothing to do with AI in itself. Generally, that our department is entirely open door. It starts from our director of compliance, who I initially we were a smaller team that when I started working in compliance. We have grown since, but we have an approach of we are available. We do not. A busy status doesn't exist on Teams as far as compliance is concerned. You're either on a call or you're available. 9 times out of 10, and that's from sort of director level to the most juniors in the team, because that's the approach we need. We need the firm to be able to come to us. We don't have we have an open culture in terms of compliance, in terms of our first role is not to tell anybody off. It's not to say don't. It is can we resolve this problem, whatever that problem may be. And we've just extended that really across into the work we do with AI. So it is similar. We are not there to tell them they can't do things. We are there to help them, enable them to do the things they need to do. Now, that's not to say there has never been resistance from IT minded people, because they have a different approach to lawyers. Of course they do. Their minds work very differently to ours. They get very excited about what they can do, whereas we tend to be a bit more. But what we have built, and it is time, frankly, that has done it. We have built a reputation in those teams that you can speak to us, and we are not just going to sit and say no. Our first answer is not no. Our answer will be, let's go away and think about that. Let's come up with a way that can work. Things like that. Obviously, sometimes it is no, but it's not an instant no, and it is we could do this. We come back with solutions, and it takes time, and frankly, occasionally, somebody new comes in at a certain level, and we have to build that relationship again. But by having it widely enough out in the firm at general levels, at different levels, there is a general acceptance that yes, come to us and we will help with a problem rather than be the problem.
Interesting.
And it has just been, and I do think the open door culture is almost the start of that. It is, we're here, to some extent, we possibly attend our offices a bit more than some of our other staff. We are fairly significantly hybrid. We're around as compliance, we're around to be humans, and we go to the different offices because with 1,400 staff in the firm, they need to see us. They need to see us, recognise us, know who we are, see that we are someone who is not terrifying. It is not a case of I've got to go and see compliance. It is I will go and see. Silly, but it is I will go and see compliance rather than I am being told I have to go and see compliance. It's a very small change, but and that then almost directs the interaction that comes from there, because it just changes every bit of the approach from beginning to end.
Yeah, I really like that, and that does take a lot of work. So is it, so they can message you on Teams or however,
Yeah.
or like they can just drop your line, they can call you? Interesting. I do think, yeah, because they compliance otherwise can be a computer says no type
Absolutely.
reputation.
Absolutely. And as I say, I mean, it's a sort of slight joke we have in the team. It's not absolutely true, but even if steam is coming out of our ears on the call, we smile, and because we need people to come to us. Do you know what I mean? If becoming someone who nobody wants to approach destroys anything we can do, it completely removes our
Yeah.
ability to do our jobs. We must be approachable.
Actually,
Yeah.
sorry. No, I've seen very similar things with sort of speaking to other firms, that there's that open sort of open discussion, education. I think it makes compliance as well sort of a shared responsibility as well, between sort of the people in the firm. But I also see that sort of there's more communication with clients as well. So the firm's clients as well. There's much more open communications regarding compliance. And I also think that now, as vendors, or what I see in the market sort of for other vendors as well, is that really just to make that compliance also just easier and not sort of heavier, and just makes it into like a natural sort of part of your everyday as well. But it's also nice to see that there's also a lot more conversation around it.
Do you see, so I'm curious about whether some firms talk about incentivization, some people talk that sometimes they talk about penalizing. I don't know whether is that something that firms are looking at, with the sort of the carrot and the stick and what's working better.
Victoria.
I would say yes, definitely. I've seen some sort of firm applying that sort of methodology of penalizing and sort of rewarding as well. It definitely encourages, I would say, to have that compliance first culture as well within the firm. But I would say still sort of the main way of promoting that is sort of through education as well. I would say sort of that open discussion is the main way of promoting that kind of culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. We're talking about AI, but it could be any other compliance conversation in that sense, couldn't it? Like timekeeping, all sorts of things. The way that firms have tried over the years to encourage that good behaviour. I think bottom line, actually, lawyers are really and business services really smart people who want to do the right thing. At the base. But I think with when you're talking about Gen AI, I think just the risks of being caught out are much greater now. But obviously it's new. And also we've just got it's different type of technology that we've not faced these types of issues. When you're talking about hallucination or whatever it might be, if you don't check it, there's a good chance that you're going to get caught out. So I think it's just it's a similar conversation to other areas we might be talking about, but it's also different. Like I think I think the challenges now for firms are greater. I don't know if you'd agree with that. It's certainly very true. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. The challenges are greater. There's a lot going on. I mean, I don't know if we'll touch on it earlier. I definitely spoke to you the other day about the AI on the other side. We now receive complaints that you can absolutely see have been drafted by AI as opposed to a human. And they are very difficult to respond to, particularly when they get the law wrong, because you have a client you have someone who's coming back to you and adamant that they are right, and they are not. But they have been pulled this by Google's AI. I mean, this is not sophisticated use at the moment. We're seeing one day we'll start to see sophisticated use of AI in drafting complaints to us. Now it is a very unsophisticated. It is. People ask the question they want to ask to Google. Google comes up with a very strange AI summary of the answer, and then they pop that into a complaint to us. And it's difficult. It's not straightforward for us to answer. That is one of the more interesting challenges of AI we are seeing at the moment. That's as much of a challenge on us to us as our own ensuring compliance with what we do, because I say it can be very, very time consuming. It's interesting, and it will go somewhere else in 6 months, 12 months. I think when we first brought in the sort of a director of AI a few years ago, nobody would ever have contemplated that we would see that, and suddenly we are. I was just chatting to a colleague upstairs on the floor above earlier, and talking about, at some point, I'm sure someone will suggest AI complaint response. And I cannot imagine anything that would be worse than an AI complaint response to an AI generated complaint that went around in circles about both getting the law wrong. But we'll see.
Hopefully with services, well, I suppose they're competitors in some senses, but there's sort of services that perhaps make this a bit better than using Google AI, like.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely.
Tell me about, so we sort of touched a tiny bit, but in terms of this perhaps comes into the carrot and the stick, but more generally policies for staff. And you touched on this, Paul, as well, in terms of ChatGPT, and I've seen different approaches to this as well, but it's so absolutely paramount. So I speak to firms who have really struggled to come up with their policy, and most hopefully now have, but it's really difficult, isn't it? Because then there's a lot of I'm seeing a lot of shadow IT coming back. I'm seeing and because the thing is, if you it's really, these public tools are really good, and actually if you just ban everything and don't provide them with an alternative, that can also create difficulty. So I suppose let's talk about policies, how they can affect staff behaviour, how you enforce them, and what they include. From either of your perspective to start with, whoever wants to start.
I could talk from our perspective for a moment, and then Victoria can come in. At the moment, we actually have published guidance rather than a strict policy, and it's for the reason you said. A strict policy doesn't make sense in the work we do. For a firm like us, if we had a strict policy that certain usage wasn't allowed, absolutely makes sense for our legal teams, but our marketing team, is there any reason for certain elements of their job they shouldn't use some AI products? Not really. Where they're not dealing with any sensitive data, where they are deciding which copy to put on the website, things like that. So the nuance is such that the guidance is in place. To some extent, initially we backed that guidance with making it impossible to access certain tools through our system. So there's a bit of a combination there of here's some guidance, but what we've also done, and the guidance is quite explicit on this, is we recognise this is where the world is going. We recognise these are products that are going to be out there. We are not simply trying to sort of hold back the future and say that law will always be as it was 10 years ago. That's very much not the approach we're taking. We are really open with staff about what we're looking at in the future. And again, exactly that, we are looking at tools that do the jobs that people might hope to use AI products that they shouldn't for, because it makes life easier. So when a situation like that comes up, someone asks that question, can I said, well, no, but this is what we are doing. And the aim is that once this is working, and once we know this works, and we know it is secure, you will be able to use that, which achieves what you were looking to do, but also removes any risk to the business. And I think that's kind of the way we approach it. I can see why, and I think I can understand the idea and the appeal of closing your eyes and ears to it and pretending we can't do this. Lawyers need to. It's unrealistic. We have got, obviously you've got staff coming in who, we are wanting to make myself feel too old. Are at a younger age where AI is an everyday part of their life, where that is how they generate. When they are posting something online, it is generated through AI. Whatever they may be doing, to sort of suggest to them, well, actually, no, that's not exist. It's a nonsense way, and that is going to push people to sort of try and work around the edges of what we do. So instead, we take a really realistic approach, and something Victoria said a lot. We educate people as to this is why you can't do that. That is actually the other thing, and it's sort of specific to this, but. Again, everything. We don't just say no. We say no and why. No and why, and what we are doing to try and achieve what they are looking for. And that usually makes it far easier for us to get the buy-in from the teams than a simple no ever would.
They sound really patronising. It sounds like having children, doesn't it?
Something like that.
Apart from my children, listen to me. Anyway, sorry, Vicky. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I've also seen it sort of from other firms that policies only really work when they are understandable, practical as well. But at the end of the day, it's so much easier when you have sort of tools available that just make it easy to do the right thing as well. So just automatically, without having to think about it, it has to be invisible for the fee earners, and yeah, there's definitely sort of maybe a move in a way from sort of the policy instructions to like a design principle where you have things built into the systems, and sort of you have it as a habit almost as part of the tools that you're using.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because yes, it needs to be embedded in the workflow almost, doesn't it, somehow, rather than just like a policy in the ether that, you know, nobody really cares about. Has to be sort of easy to consume at the point of need almost.
Yeah, exactly. There's already so many other things sort of solicitor does on a day-to-day basis, and that's just sort of another rule. So we just want to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm seeing some. So to your point about banning and explaining. So I did a panel with a firm where one of their Silex litigators was using Perplexity, and then the firm banned it, and she was outraged. And then they started using Copilot. They gave her Copilot instead. So they were saying, you know, we understand, because she was saying, you know, it's so brilliant and I love it, and you know, like and that's the trouble, you know, these tools are really good. So then they went, right, no, we don't support that for lots and lots of reasons, but now we're doing a stage rollout of Copilot, and they did a lot of training, and they did shared experience, and actually she was on my panel talking about how excited she was to use that. So actually it kind of resonates, I think. So fine. So, and in terms of from your perspective, Vicky, about talking about you know, this is one other thing that I get speaking to firms a lot. I speak to firms a lot now, obviously, about this. We've touched on quite a lot of things that firms are looking at, but one of the things they are doing is looking to vendors to support them, and that is quite multi-layer. So that might be, you know, supporting them in terms of guidance or best practice, etc. That, because obviously you have a view of the market, but also it might be a case of, you know, are you baking compliance into products, etc. So there's many ways that vendors can help. But talk me through that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's one of those things that we work quite closely with our clients, so law firms, sort of from the very beginning of before we start to design our products or any sort of iteration or feature, and just making sure as well from their side that, you know, we are compliant. We also obviously our staff as well also follows sort of the compliance rules, but also just working directly with the client and having that conversation from the very first moment. So from day one, sort of when the idea comes in, to ensure that, you know, the solution also works for them, and then sort of working with them throughout the way. I think, Paul, you also mentioned you might be doing something quite similar within the firm, sort of having that continuous conversation. And that's what we do as well, sort of just speaking with law firms to ensure that it meets sort of all the compliance requirements, and in terms of usability as well, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's obviously, you know, very much partnering with firms. How do you so for either of you, so just as we sort of start to come towards the end of the session, and jump in if you've got any questions, obviously. I feel like, you know, you talk about the client in your sense, it's the law firms, but, you know, let's talk about clients as well in general. So you've got this huge pressure now to to innovate, to be efficient, to use technology. You've got some great products on the market. I've seen more movement. I've been writing about legal for 1,000 years, tech about for 11 years. I've seen more change and movement in the last 2 years than in the last 10 probably. It's kind of exciting and also daunting for a lot of people. So how do you have any sort of takeaways on how people should, how you or people are balancing that need to innovate, move really fast with being compliant, with a client lens as well, on, in terms of clients are pushing you and they're saying, don't use AI, do use AI. It's like, what's your sort of advice, I suppose?
I don't think I could get to advice. I can tell you what I think, and this is what we would do within our team. We'd put forward what we think and we'd come up. I mean, it's difficult. What you just said there, I think, is most significant. Some clients are desperate for the idea of AI. Some aren't. Depending on what area of the law you're in and what that AI is doing, the reason they want it is because they believe that's going to bring the cost down and the fee down for the work you were doing. It's not hugely the kind of things we're doing, but there's some areas, and there are firms out there. Certainly one in Liverpool. It's quite heavily AI driven. Sort of commercial contracts type of business. I could see that their clients would be desperate for that. I also could see that they may well find that there are questions as to their bill at the end of it when the client says, well, you told me this was all going to be done by AI, so why am I paying? There's a strange balance there. Certainly the work we do as lawyers, people don't love our fees a lot of the time. They don't necessarily love paying us come the end of they never quite think the work has been of the value it should be. Or it's maybe unfair, but it's not uncommon. And I do think there's an interesting thing there. What we try and do is consider what our clients do want. And I know it sounds very, very sort of obvious and flippant, but we have a wide range of clients, and our clients, some, the thought or concept of AI would be terrifying. And they if you started getting into that with them on a really significant part of the case, it wouldn't work. I certainly know I get incredibly frustrated if I'm speaking to an AI chatbot with any sort of business, and you can tell them a mile off. One day maybe not. Right now you can tell a mile off that it's an AI chatbot, or at least I feel I can on the ones I have used. And I think it's whereas some people love it. Some people will think this is great. I'm getting the answers I want. I think we try to look at what our client, what does that general breadth of client want, but we don't force any client into any direction. If a client was to say, that is not for me, whether it's AI, whether it's technology, whether it's chat portals, anything like that, if it's not for them, it's not for them. If they want to have, and again, this is not AI really, but just the same sort of thing in terms of whether technology versus, if they want letters in the post because that's the way they've always worked and that's how they think a lawyer should work, fine, they get letters in the post. If they want to work, we will work them that way to an extent. We are not going to be totally pushed around, but we bear it in mind for the sort of profile of our clients.
Interesting. And from our side, we are definitely just sort of looking at the problem to solve. So if it's AI doesn't necessarily going to solve that problem, we are not going to do the AI just because it's AI. It's definitely, we are going to focus on actual building a solution that works sort of for everyone. But I would say, I think there's quite a lot of things that sort of AI can really help with. I mean, at the moment, we are also using it, for example, if you think about it, if you want to do a compliance check, I think AI would be a great tool to do that sort of at the click of a button. But definitely we are looking at sort of how the best is to solve the given problem rather than just sort of sticking a label on things that says AI.
Just stick it on everything. There's a question. Sort of very sensitive topic. So had about AI and jobs. How is AI? It's not saying are you going to have to cut jobs, so it's not going to the heart of that, but there is a perception. So it's asking about the perception. How is AI affecting the perception that it will lead to job loss? I mean, it's something that everybody's wrestling with, to be frank. It has to be very carefully managed. I think people are afraid, quite generally afraid. The firms I speak to, a lot of people are worrying about what AI means for the future of work, and their role, and different firms are handling that I've seen. And if anyone wants to jump in on this, different firms are handling it. Some firms, and we're just going to come on in the last few minutes to talk about using AI in compliance challenges. Some progressive firms I've seen are using AI to train young lawyers. There's all this question about will AI mean that young lawyers can't undertake tasks that mean that they can progress and become all these questions. And actually AI is going towards solving some of those challenges, and will do increasingly. I do think that there's concerns. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to it. Vicky, do you see this in the firms that you're dealing with? Are they concerned?
I wouldn't say they're concerned. I think AI is a tool that can help them save time. I don't think there might be, of course, some jobs sort of affected, but I would say definitely it's going to be. You'll need still human lawyers. A client, as you mentioned, Paul, earlier as well, they won't want to talk to a chatbot, or and you still need that sort of human element, I would say. And from that perspective, I would say it's definitely just going to be a tool that sort of helps you make your job easier. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's going to affect sort of all the roles. There will be probably some, there might be some, but I think it's, in the end of the day, it's going to be sort of a helpful tool.
Yeah. I think it might be radical, but who knows? And I agree with you about the human element. I think that everyone's, particularly in this kind of work as well, that you want a human. Just quickly, I suppose, using AI in meeting compliance challenges. So can you talk me through that? How you're doing that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we've seen sort of AI already transforming the research and sort of document comparison. But I would say next step is definitely sort of the file reviews, onboarding checks. So things like compliance dashboard, for example, for your compliance officers. So I would say that AI is going to turn compliance into sort of this proactive function rather than a predictive one, or even a reactive one. And I would say AI is going to be a game changer, and it's just going to make sort of compliance faster, more consistent as well. And just going back to sort of what I point, if you have sort of a compliance officer that can do your compliance checks just with the click of a button, I think that's where sort of the technology is heading.
Paul, did you have anything to add?
Not really. I think, again, we seem to be agreeing on lots and lots of things. Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think there are going to be tools that make, in many ways, our lives easier and the lives of my team easier. The straightforward one that's something's mentioned there, but essentially removing the need for me to listen to a 30-minute phone call to find the 35 seconds that I need, which is a part of my job, not on the AIs. If an AI product can do that and point me to the 35 seconds I need very quickly, the time saving there is unbelievable. It's little things like that to me, like I said, that's where it will really assist us. I think file reviews, I think there is a world where that can be done. I think there's a lot of other dev work that would need to be done to get to that point. But at some of our file reviews, that will work because we're the kind of firm we are, the importance of data to us. We have a lot of data points. So there are once that side of the world is where it needs to be, it would be very much possible to check. Now that still is reliant on humans ensuring those data points are properly completed, or even if not that the appropriate workflows have been followed to get to the point that those are completed. But in any event, those kind of things will only help us. I think just very quickly on what you said, and I do understand the sort of worry about young lawyers, but I think certainly for us, they are taking away the jobs they didn't like to do and having them more on the jobs they are interested in. And that's kind of surely a better thing. Again, I think of when I was 18 and first went and did work experience in a firm of solicitors, you would spend a lot of your time putting files into filing cabinets. That is a job that disappeared for most firms probably 25 years ago. the profession isn't poorer for that first step, but not being part of your experience anymore, is it? 25 years probably a bit strong. 20 anyway, but you know, but there was a time where like it would be amazing to think that anyone could ever have a first job in law that didn't involve putting files in the filing cabinet and getting files out of the filing cabinet. You know, we will one day probably think the same of some of the tasks that are being taken over by AI. You know what? Of course, that's not necessary.
Yeah, and that goes back to that simulated, like the worry over, you know, how are we going to learn? Like if we haven't got associates going into data rooms and pouring through loads of files and, you know, all the stuff, like how are they going to learn? And if they don't do some of the review tasks, which now I guess is more to point in case, you know, with having to read lots of documents to summarize them, you know, which we have, which right now there'll be firms still using associates to do that, obviously. You know, how are they going to learn if they're not doing that? But actually you will be able to use AI to simulate learning and education, and I'm already seeing examples of that, which is really cool, you know. And so there will be tech that doesn't even exist now that will help to educate and for people to sort of, you know, in a almost can be synthetic. That sounds like a negative word, but you know, learn their craft perhaps more effectively, because partners often don't have time. When I was a trainee, most of the partners that were supposed to educate me didn't have time. They were too busy. So this idea that you've got the best quality learning, you know, is not necessarily the case. Whereas using AI, you probably do. What's your? I'm going to give you, like, I'm going to finish up in a minute. Do you have? I'm putting you on the spot here. Didn't give you notice of this. Could you give me like a top 2 or 3 takeaways for people in terms of, if you to wrap up this conversation, both of you, and just go, right, these are my 2 or 3 key takeaways from this conversation that I think you should take away? What would they be?
I can start off. I would say that I think AI is definitely a great tool to sort of to promote sort of, I mean, if it's used responsibly and transparently, then definitely it's going to be a tool that's going to help amazingly with sort of compliance. I think it's going to be a game changer as well for compliance overall. That would be one of the points that I wanted to make. And I think it's also exciting to see sort of that open conversation between clients and sort of vendors as well, but also the law firms having that sort of more open conversation regarding compliance with their customers as well.
All right, thank you. And Paul, super quick, because I'm going to
very, very quick. That I think almost we should try to relax a little bit more about AI and not think of it either fixing everything or being a terrifying thing. It is just another tool, as there have been many, many tools over however many hundreds of years people have been practicing law, and neither is going to either revolutionize and change it forever or completely destroy it. Us as lawyers need to look at what we want from it and take that from it, and I genuinely think that's the most important thing.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Thank you for that. Really, really interesting. Really appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone listening in, and for your questions. And someone's flagged a new ISO certification which is coming out, so we'll share details of that when we share the webinar. Really wish you have a great rest of the end of the year, and I look forward to catching up again soon. And thanks to everybody for listening in. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.